Hi everybody, welcome back. It is pretty late. It's 12:30 today, October 24th, 2017. Let me just mute my own tab. I always seem to forget that. Um, so yeah, I'm reintroducing myself. By the way, I am on minds.com at Chef Leopard. Most of my tags, by the way, on Twitter is at Chef Leopard, on Facebook is at Chef Leopard, on minds.com is at Chef Leopard, and on VidMe. There's not a lot of content on most of those, especially minds.com. I only think I have one post on there so far, but if people want to reach out to me, I know a lot of the people that are more into the alt tech are into minds.com, and it seems like there's a lot of capabilities on it. So if anybody wants to join, kind of tell me, what their experience is on it and how they like it. We can link up, maybe work on some content together. I have been um, since I got my new job in March, I've had to scale back a lot of my work in terms of just social media sharing. It's kind of why I share more on YouTube than I do on other channels. But it's actually the fact of the matter is that I've scaled back my content sharing compared to my old job where I used to just uh, share crap all day. Just can't do it anymore. There's too much work to do. Today, I'm going to talk about a subject that I kind of introduced last night, but I didn't have any time for it. If you have been following the goings on in the Democratic Party since last year, you would know that there is a civil war going on the left, or exactly what the left is. We don't even know anymore. They can't decide. There is a progressive left, most evident with the Bernie supporters. There's a centrist left, and not necessarily the Hillary people, but they could be included. But you could say somebody like Joe Manchin. Um, there's certainly Tim Ryan. He's from Ohio. Is a center left Democrat. Not exactly the same as a Bernie Sanders type. And then there's the corporate Democrats, who are the ones that are so powerful despite their um, low approval rating and the fact that their own party supporters hate them. Um, they seem to have the most influence. They have the most access to media. All those stories that I've been talking about in the past few days, especially concerning Weinstein and the New York Times and Elle magazine. If you look at my blog, struttingleopard.blogspot.com, type it in. I've got two stories about quote unquote feminist writers that, and I'm not the only one. Okay, I'm not trying to say that I'm only the one bringing the perspective, but I can tell you that if you track these people's records, um, they've been manipulating the narrative for so many years in terms of using feminism when it's convenient for them. And the same thing with the DNC. Okay, this is a party, the Democratic Party, that has defended Bill Clinton for years, and yet they have a party chief, or former party chief, Donna Brazile, who's repeatedly used the sexism card against people that criticize it. Sometimes even the race card because she's black, but she's used the sexism card. I was watching Jimmy Dore. Yes, I do watch Jimmy Dore because it's important to see uh, where your opposition is focusing. If you have opponents that, and not that I'm comparing myself in terms of viewership or in terms of influence, but yeah, I watch those shows in order to see what these guys are focusing on, and yeah, they know that the Democratic Party has them so far up the creek because there was a clip that was being featured that Jordan Sheridan, one of the TYT reporters, went up and started asking her questions, and she said, well, this is the way you treat women. You don't trust them, and whatever. That's the way that they respond to reporters. And I'm no fan of Jordan Sheraton either anymore, since he became pretty much a mouthpiece for TYT. I want to welcome 1980s Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet. I know that you've been trying to escape from the custody of the British or whoever it was who uh, extradited you to Chile. So I guess you're fine to hang out here. I won't rat you out, even though I'm not really a supporter of Pinochet. But I think I actually know the guy who is the user for the Augusto Pinochet account. But I'm not sure. I can't be totally sure, and I'm not going to say his name on the air. But I know somebody who's a huge fan of Augusto Pinochet, which if you would have asked me 20 years ago, would have horrified me. But I've read enough about dictators to see that for some reason every dictator has a lot of fans, and sometimes for entirely logical reasons. Um, so we're going to cover this DNC scandal. We're also going to cover, if you haven't seen it, two different issues that or two different interviews I did with Catalonian separatists, and it's really becoming a full-blown crisis over there. And those of you that are, I know there's a possibility that people will say, "Oh, Catalonia, fuck them," because they're progressives and they're for socialism and all that. That's not the point here. With what's happening in Catalonia, okay, you can support Catalonia, you can support Spain. I don't know. It's not really. I don't really care. It's not that I'm not taking sides. It's that, to be honest with you, I think that part of it should be resolved internally in Spain. The part that cannot be solved internally is the fact that Spain is an integral part of the European Union, which claims to represent democracies where voters' rights aren't trampled on or citizens' rights aren't trampled on and people aren't just beaten in the streets. And yet, this is what's happening exactly in Catalonia. They're being threatened by force, and they're actually going to lose their autonomy next week. So I find it important to cover that topic as much as possible when I get the time. So what should we start with? Where was my link? Oh, here we go. I have it all the way. So before we start, are there any? So Mr. Pinochet is like sticking up for his legacy, the only right-wing dictator of the 20th century, and saved South America from communist rule. Well, that's not true. I think another right-wing dictator would have been Chiang Kai-shek of China. But yeah, he didn't save China from communist rule, obviously. So let's share this screen. This is for, and I'm somebody, believe me, I don't just take sources from the right, I take from the left. And In These Times, if you don't know, is a far left, retardedly communist magazine I used to see at the library, and I'd pick it up and I'd be like, holy fuck, these people are out of their minds. They'd be printing these glossies where I don't think that they ever made uh, Leonid Brezhnev look so attractive, looking like a pile of vomit, but in glossy. That's what In These Times does. They were like a far left magazine in my library back when I was in high school. So it says here, it's still their party. What the DNC purge means for the Democrats' left flank. By removing Ellison and Sanders backers from DNC leadership, the Democratic establishment is ruthlessly tightening its grip on the party. Progressives should take a lesson. Ever since the 2016 presidential primary, unity has been the watchword of Democratic Party politics. As soon as it became apparent that Hillary Clinton had clinched the nomination, establishment Democrats warned the party's grassroots that the stakes were now too high for intra-party bickering. In that spirit, at the Democratic National Convention, a Unity and Reform Commission was established to help bridge the rift between Sanders and Clinton wings of the party. Yet, at its meeting last week in Las Vegas, the Democratic establishment under the leadership of Democratic National Committee Chair Tom Perez demonstrated yet again that for all its vaunted talk about unity, it remains committed to relegating Berniecrats and other progressive Democrats to the margins. At that meeting, Perez ousted 4 long-serving officials who represent the so-called Sanders wing of the Democratic Party. These officials all had backed Minnesota Representative Keith Ellison over Perez, the Obama administration labor secretary who had previously been elected to a seat on the Montgomery County Council in Maryland in the tussle over the DNC chairmanship. The list includes Ray Buckley, the New Hampshire Democratic Party's chair since 2007, who was kicked off the DNC Executive and Rules Committees, longtime party secretary Alice Germund, who was removed from her at-large appointment to the DNC, and James Zogby, the president of the Arab American Institute, an outspoken critic of Israel, who has been taken off the Resolutions and Executive Committee. So then Perez has attempted to prevent the change-up from looking like a wholesale purge. He has appointed Larry Cohn, chair of the Sanders-backed Our Revolution PAC, to that large position, along with Bernie Sanders' former press secretary, Simone Sanders, and a number of high-profile union leaders. And both Ellison and Royce West, an Ellison backer, have joined the executive committees. Still, these are relatively minor gestures when compared to the unceremonious removal of long-serving Ellison-supporting figures from key roles. It's also clear that those who were removed view the move less charitably. And then it says, there's a lot of upset about the people who were appointed, and I am too, Zogby told Vox. Buckley called it very disappointing. Germund, who served on the DNC since the 1980s, told Vanity Fair that she had been left out in the cold without even a call from the chairman, despite serving on the DNC forever, a state of affairs she called quite unusual. So let's look at some of the people that they did. I'm not going to read through word by word because, we'll be here the whole night. But it says they actually appointed some who didn't officially endorse Clinton, such as former Deputy Labor Secretary Chris Lu, were early donors to her campaign. They appointed Jeff Berman, a former lobbyist for the Keystone Pipeline, who was being paid by Clinton's campaign for work on delegate counting strategy. At the same time, he himself was a superdelegate. But they also appointed Elaine Kamarck and longtime Clinton operative Harold Ickes. 7 members of the Rules and Bylaw Committee were pro-Clinton superdelegates in the primary, and nearly all endorsed Clinton in the primary. Some who didn't officially endorse Clinton, such as former Deputy Labor Secretary Chris Lu, were early donors to the campaign. The list also includes Donna Brazile, who notoriously used her position at CNN in March 2016 to feed debate questions and topics to the Clinton campaign in advance. An interesting choice for a committee that focuses on rules. And then they appointed also AFSCME President Lee Saunders and AFT President Randy Weingarten. And those were 2 labor leaders. Randy Weingarten has, and I'm going to come back here. Randy Weingarten, just so you know, has been a union boss in the teachers' unions for decades. And you have Lee Saunders. AFSCME is one of the largest public sector unions in the country. So compared to them, this nurses union, which I don't support either, they have no chance because private sector unions are much more vulnerable than public sector ones. And that's a very easy thing to understand. The public sector unions can usually depend on decades and decades of dues because they depend on government enterprises, government-owned enterprises employing their workers. So usually those people will be there for long periods of time. The private sector unions are going through one of their worst. I mean, they've been going through a horrible period since at least the 70s and 80s. They've just lost more and more membership because industry is wrapping up. There's less industries and sectors of the economy that allow unionization. It's a huge problem for them. So the nurses union, they're going to have a major issue combating the more well-established teachers unions and public sector unions within the DNC and the Democratic Party. It says this is bad news for anybody hoping the party would abolish or even simply tweak the superdelegate system to make it fairer, as Sanders had talked about doing last year. Kamarck, for instance, had a hand in creating the superdelegate system in 1982 when it was first introduced. She previously told In These Times that superdelegates were created to stop outlier candidates. What else does it say here? They appointed Bob Mulholland, who claimed that Sanders should join the party because only party members should control the Democrats. And he says Sanders runs around the country screaming at people to adopt his policies. The least the DNC can do is urge him to run as a Democrat in 2018 in the era of Donald Trump. Okay, I don't know. That's actually. I mean, it's not a bad point. It's just I don't see why that's so important. It's more important for them to have him carry their label than it is for them to actually live up to their policies. That's what's so sad about the Democrats. And again, I'm not a Democrat and I'm not a progressive. I'm just saying that it's fucked up. Earlier in October, Perez appointed Dan Halpern, an opponent of raising the minimum wage, to the DNC's Finance Committee and has resisted the push among progressives in the party to back a Medicare for all healthcare system as a flagship policy. To be sure, such impulses aren't unique to Perez. Back in June, California Democrats in the legislature blocked a single-payer health care bill that had been supported by grassroots advocates in the state. Then they go into the whole issue of Perez having been selected by Obama in order to outflank Sanders. Okay, he'd never occupied a major elected office before. And then there's all this stuff about here. Soon after, stories began appearing that brought up Ellison's past association with Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. Ellison was derided as a lackluster black Muslim and hit with the none too subtle insinuation that he still carried the group's anti-Semitic attitudes. Democratic megadonor and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers mogul Haim Saban declared Ellison an anti-Semite and anti-Israel individual, while the Anti-Defamation League decided that Ellison's comments claiming Israel has a disproportionate influence on U.S. foreign policy were disqualifying. Others took a different tack. There's too much at stake for us to not have somebody working in a full capacity. Michael Blake, an Obama campaign veteran, told the New York Times, echoing Perez's own words on the subject. The criticism suggested that Ellison's job as a sitting congressman meant he would be unable to devote his full attention to the DNC chair role. 6 months into his tenure heading the DNC, this is funny, Perez took on a side gig at Brown University. And then it says, as DNC chair, Perez's performance so far has been less than stellar. And I'm going to break. There's only so much of this crap that I can read because it's both true and it's also bullshit. Why is it true? Because everything they're saying about how pathetic Perez is true. But let me set up the scenario here. I know there's a couple people who listen to this from outside the U.S. Just seeing if there's any new comments. You guys are free to ask any questions if you want, by the way. I have to tune out the chat for a while in order to stay focused. So let me set up what the issue was. In 2016, if you remember, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the woman who rigged the DNC primaries in favor of Hillary Clinton, had to resign. Those are corporate Democrats. They're tied in with all the lobbyists. They're tied in with lobbyists from all sides, even sides that contradict people who say that the Israel lobby controls the DNC. Okay, but they're also controlled by the Saudi lobby. They're also controlled by other, the Iran lobby. They all take money from anybody. Okay, So yes, what in these times is alluding to when they accuse the Clinton wing of being influenced, let's say, by Haim Saban. Why are they influenced by him? Because he donates a lot of money. Now, on the other hand, they're also taking money from people who do what? They're in favor of the Iran nuclear deal, which Israel opposes. They will take money from anybody. Remember this, they will take money from anybody. So it's not incorrect. If anybody's telling you, oh, you can't criticize the Israel lobby, you should say, oh, no, I can criticize whoever I want. But you should also remember that they take money from the other side too. They take money from other people, other parties, with that, or so other sides of the conflict, which that article alluded to, and we'll get back to that. I just wanted to put that out front for a second because it was kind of, it's something I've been noticing a little more within this whole web of garbage that the DNC is involved in. There's that whole issue. So Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigns. This is a woman who, on the surface, is a huge corporate Democrat, and she has plenty of deep connections to these to these mega donors and lobbyists. So she had to step down. She's replaced by who? Donna Brazil. Donna Brazil later also, she was interim chair anyway, but she was not able to keep the position. Why? Because she was implicated for also, uh, through WikiLeaks, she was shown to have favored Clinton and leaked information during the debates to the Clinton side, among other things, including revealing when she was vice chair of the party that she would like to slap the hell out of the Sanders supporters. I believe that's the way it was phrased. Excuse me. um, so then they had to, while Brazil was the interim chair, they had to run this whole election charade. And it's not even a real election. They would campaign around the country, and I think some of these were like live broadcast on Huffington Post. These campaign debates for the head of the DNC, and you had some of the most ridiculous people there. There were corporate Democrats, like the one from South Carolina. There was one from Arkansas that was disqualified because he criticized Islam for being homophobic. There was one for so these are the more unusual ones. There was one named Sam Ronan who actually had a lot of very interesting ideas on how to address the real corruption in the DNC. Now, it's kind of funny that nobody voted for him. I don't think he got a single vote, because the people who control the DNC didn't want to change it for the better. Now remember, this wasn't Democratic voters who choose the head of the DNC. It's DNC committee members. So I think it was a group of about 450 or so people that, these are state, local, and local party chiefs. They were the people who elected the DNC chair, and it largely boiled down to two candidates. After you really get through the thick of it, all the other candidates were except for this Sam Ronan guy, were basically morons. One of them, she said that her job was to tell white people to shut up. She was from Idaho. I wonder how easy it is for her to explain that one away over there. It's not like you're exactly running into a lot of it's not like the set of In Living Color there. Let me put it that way. So then you have Tom Perez, as was explained in the article accurately, is the former labor secretary under Obama, and he was basically promising more of the same, shoving out the same platitudes about how you need to resist Trump, and eventually he started just, saying outright saying fuck Trump. That was his whole thing. He started just using profanity and attacking Trump like in the most direct way. And then you had his main opponent was Keith Ellison, a congressman from Minnesota. I think he was the first Muslim to be elected to the House of Representatives. And he has a long track record that in these times alluded to, of making first of all, yes, he is a former member of the Nation of Islam, and for them to claim, oh, that's not really a problem. Well, then, if somebody was a member of the Church of the Creator, which is a white supremacist religious group, as compared to the Nation of Islam, which is a black supremacist group, then I don't think that they would have the same attitude. I think that they would say, oh, he can't. That for the same reason that David Duke is not welcome in the mainstream parties. Okay, and hypothetically there could be some Duke supporter out there. So I'm just saying, in terms of mainstream politics, I can't believe I'm trying to disclaim for a David Duke fan, but the same type of standard should be applied to a David Duke supporter as to a Louis Farrakhan supporter. I'm not saying that the parties should ban them from the rolls, because I don't belong to either party. I don't care. But if you're going to make a discriminatory principle, discriminatory policy towards a David Duke supporter, Louis Farrakhan is virtually the same type of person, and so is the Nation of Islam. They've said many just hateful things about white people, about sometimes women. I think they're kind of misogynistic, especially by DNC standards. They're pretty anti-Jew. They're against interracial dating, I believe, and obviously interracial marriage. So for him to act, I had no idea that he had those views, and they focus only about the Jewish stuff, which I think is unfair. Augusto Pinochet, I'll answer your question. I'll try to answer it. I don't know how long of an answer you want, so when you're satisfied, I'll let you know. But hold on a couple minutes. Yeah, so they only focus on the Jewish issue. The Nation of Islam has horrible views on white people in general, and I think it's worth noting that if you're going to attack people for extremist religious beliefs, like they've done for even for Mitt Romney, then you have to include the Nation of Islam. You have to include Islam. You have to include all the every religion has something very odd about it that doesn't jibe with the mainstream American attitudes. Okay, so yeah, Keith Ellison definitely. For those of you that are like, oh, yeah, they just smeared him because he went up against the DNC. Well, no, Alan Dershowitz, for example, who was somebody I don't support. I think he's a horrible. I don't hate him. I'm just saying that he's a horrible spokesperson. He's one of these corporate Democrats, but he made a very good case against Keith Ellison. He said, well, this type of guy, there's plenty of us that won't stay in the Democratic Party. He's somebody who's exhibited remarks that are, for example, that it was the Jews who orchestrated 9/11, things like that. And I wouldn't stay in the party. And would you? Okay, whether you believe in those theories or not, I know some of you could be out there and you could believe them, but if you were somebody like Dershowitz and Ellison became DNC chair, you would not stay in the Democratic Party. I guarantee you. It's just a statement of fact. Um, beyond that, once Ellison lost, and Keith Ellison and I'm sorry, Tom Perez became the DNC chair. Okay, they created a new position called the deputy chair of the DNC just for Ellison. And what did Dershowitz do after he threatened to leave the DNC if Ellison was elected chair? He said, oh, it's okay. He's not going to be chair. He's going to be, hey, he forgot to say that he's going to be deputy chair. So this is something I find, I'd like to really debate one of those people. I don't know if I would do it on video, and I don't know if they would, but I'd like to ask them, so once Tom Perez fails, as he inevitably will, because he's a pathetic leader, he's one of the worst leaders. You can just see his stage presence is just weak and uninspiring, and he just gets booed wherever he goes. What are they supposed to do? He steps down. Who becomes a leader? Probably. How do you justify them not promoting Keith Ellison to be party leader, DNC chair? Well, then are you going to stay in the party? That's the question. And if they are, then they don't have any integrity. Then it's not Keith Ellison's fault, because Keith Ellison can't change who Keith Ellison is. That it's not his job to become somebody else. It's his, and Keith Ellison is certainly being dishonest about his positions. But once he becomes chair of the DNC, if these if these frauds stay in the party, like Alan Dershowitz, who's just been for years trying to pretend that his liberal sensibilities really are in the interests of his community, then I think that more and more people are going to start to see things the way I do, at least in the Jewish community. And I hope I hope there's parallels of this same situation for people in the Black community, for people who are Christians in the Democratic Party, Catholics, people who are Mexicans in the Democratic Party. The whole identity politics charade, the circus that goes on in the Democratic Party is falling apart. People are starting to realize, I don't really believe in what they're saying. I don't think that people should have their firearms confiscated. I don't know what made me think that. I guess because my parents were, Jews, and they voted for the Democratic Party. I thought that I should vote for them too. There's people who think that. There's people who are coming to realize that. There's people of there's people realizing that neither party is good for them. I'm not telling people to vote for the other side. I think it's hard for me, really, it is, to think of myself voting for the Republicans next year too. But it will sure be the one benefit for the Republicans winning is that you get to see Democrats losing. Let me see if I can answer Pinochet's question. And J-Man Truth Seeker, I think he can kind of chime in whether he agrees with me, because he's in the same boat. He says, are you concerned about the left's unbreakable hate for the Jews? Yes and no. Yes, there's a lot of hate on the left for the Jews. There are a number of people on the left that are actually genuinely not hateful for the Jews, but they're really, I think sometimes they're kind of hiding and not even, and ignoring what's going on around them, being quaint and just trying to fit in. And I'm not being, I'm not trying to be nice. I'm just saying that, for example, H.A. Goodman, who is Jewish, is a huge progressive, and he does call out anti-Jewish rhetoric on the left. There are people on the left who have decided. Roseanne Barr, by the way, who was I think she was a major candidate for either the Green Party or the Peace and Freedom Party, came out a couple years ago and said, they actually do hate the Jews, and I know that because I am one, and I've seen them come after me. And I've always said, people, in my opinion, people can have opinions. They can hate me. They can hate my religion and everything. That's part of the game of me having the freedom to say what I think, is that people can say that they hate me and that they despise my people and everything. That's not the fact that they hold those opinions is not something that I think is can ever be eliminated. So I tend to accept it. There's other people like Dershowitz who think that they can cure it, and those people are wrong. The only way that you can mitigate it is by showing people that you're a reasonable person and that you'll listen to what they're saying, and try to argue against it, try to pose logical counterpoints to what they're saying. I contacted somebody a couple weeks ago who was giving some for example, some of the older theories about the USS Liberty and everything. And I said, we should have a chat, talk about it, hash out some of the facts on both sides. And, we may not come to an agreement, but at least you get to really thresh out the way you see the world, and I get to tell you why I disagree. And that's the attitude I think that's most effective. I could be wrong, but I think it's better than what Dershowitz does, where he tries to call everybody who disagrees with him kind of a conspiracy theorist, in which case um, it's really hit or miss. With Keith Ellison, it's a hit. Keith Ellison kind of is a loony. But I'll tell you why I'm not afraid. I'm not concerned. Because, to return to your question, are you concerned about the left's unbreakable hate for the Jews? I think it goes beyond the Jews. I think it goes towards religion as a whole. Religion as a whole. Now, they look at the Jews as a race in some ways, but in other ways, they look at them as, they'll use the whole, I'm not anti-Jew, I'm anti-Zionist, or something like that. They'll use that as a sort of cloak. Well, the fact is that no, they are people who hate the belief in any sort of God or gods. I don't believe in the worship of many gods. I hate to even, not that I have anything against Hindus as people, but I don't believe that in polytheism. So I don't like that religion, but I can accept. Okay, I can accept the fact that I can impose my religion on other people, including Hindus. The left has a different perspective. They think that if you believe in a religion, you must be some sort of idiot, some sort of backward moron, or you're a protected class of people in the case of Muslims, and that anything that attacks you is racist. And that's one of the biggest disconnects, because um, at the fundamental level, the left and Islam, what do they have in common? The only thing I see that they have in common is this authoritarian desire to control human behavior. Okay, and in some ways, I think the left is worse than Islam. Okay, and because there are forms of Islam that there are forms of Islam. Pay attention. Okay, those of you that hate Islam as an idea, there are forms of Islam that are in the minority, that are very permissive of different points of view. I think that they've kind of, to put it lightly, they've been shoved into the closet by their more extremist and violent tendencies, and I don't think that they have a future. I think eventually a lot of the more pluralistic forms of Islam are going to disappear, because they're just they're not they're not fighting people. They're not people who will defend their rights against the people who are authoritarian, the people who are controlling. The ISIS types and the Iranian regime, for example. And there's far worse than Iran. Um, so that's what I think. That on the left, you have this just loathing of religion and the belief in God, which I think is horrible. I think that it's worse than atheism. I think atheism, at least these are people that they try to make a case as to why they think that there is no God, or why they just can't understand why the belief in God. That those people, I don't. It's not an easy time with them either, but they're not trying to necessarily pretend that they're promoting a, a new type of humanity, which is what the left does. They try to promote a utopian vision of humanity, which is beyond atheism. So A. Pinochet says it's beginning to look more and more similar to the 1920s on the left, and I'm not sure many people see it. I see it. I think I agree with you on that. I think I have to say that there's plenty of issues on the left where they just don't know where their boundaries are. They want a revolution with no compromise, and that's why you have people that take screen names of South American dictators from the 1970s and 80s that used to throw leftists out of helicopters. As I'm sure some people in the audience might be able to bear witness. um, I think people are finally waking, and you know, it took me a long time. It didn't happen recently. It happened maybe 8 or 9 years ago. I started to realize this about the left, and I think those of us that are of this mindset, and I understand that there's other ways of thinking about it. And there are people. Look, I used to believe in a lot of the socialist beliefs, but it was such a long time ago that I can't understand that mindset anymore. I think it comes from that idea that you see people that have less than you do, and you wonder why it has to be that way, and then you just keep rolling down the hill from there. And you see how far it's gone. The crimes that I read about in China under Mao, they were so graphic and cruel, and Mao's cruelty to his own friends, like Zhao. Okay, you should look at his friend Zhao, the foreign minister, one of his closest advisors. You should look it up, Zhao Enlai. His cruelty to him, it convinced me that communism is the worst philosophy in human history. And those of you that say Nazism, I think it's a category within communism. Okay, and it's not worse. It's part of it. It's part of it. There are significant differences, but it is that there's to say that those two are not related. Um, no, I can't accept it. I think it's the same mindset. The fact that you can treat your ill friend like he did to Zhao, and keep him alive in order for him to suffer until he does die, and the way he treated his other friends like Liu Shaoqi. Forget about the millions and tens of millions of people that he killed besides them. Those indicate the real core of what communism is. It's a desire to completely control society and have it directed from the top. It's the worst form of human dictatorship that there is. It's liberating people from the slavery of a few to be the slaves of everyone. Um, and I think the people that are watching right now will agree with me. I don't think that there's anybody here right now that'll disagree on that. But there has to be. We have to get that message out, and I think thanks to you guys, because I know some of you guys are active in that. We're making headway now. Why am I talking about the DNC? Okay, because I can't keep going forever today. But thanks for bringing up the topic, Augusto Pinochet. But the DNC again, we are seeing, and I actually trolled a Democrat today. I trolled him on the Real News, one of their Facebook posts. They were complaining, oh, the DNC, they're purging our members, they're purging our progressive members. And I said, that's pretty funny. I mean, you don't get the communist economics in the Democratic Party quite yet, but you do get the communist method of management, which is purges. And he didn't get it. He started saying, well, that's not really communism. The action, you see I'm actually kind of gaining weight right now, so I look like the meme. I had like a ton of barbecue today, and I'm ruining my wellness plan at work. But there's this meme that goes around where you just see a fat guy saying, actually, like the communists that say, actually, that's not real communism. That's what this guy did. And I said, you moron, what I'm talking about is the management. The management is always top-down dictatorship. That's the way you do it under communism. I don't care how real communism is not run by these unemployed baristas working at a Caribou, or formerly working at a Caribou over in Indianapolis, okay, with their Beats headphones and their driving a Prius. That's not no. You don't get to determine who real communism is if you're one of those people. Real communism is these people that have perpetrated it in the past. Perpetrated it, yes. Communism is the theft of private property in order to create a collective identity centered around a cult of personality. That's the way it's been. Hold on. I had to switch devices. I have a little freeze on my other one. Let me just mute this and I'll see if... I'll be right there, those of you in the chat. Thanks for sticking around, by the way, on this late Tuesday morning. Tell me if you can hear me in the chat. Okay, yeah, I think you guys can hear me again. So the other story I'm going to talk about, and I don't have the links on because my computer was on the fritz, but yeah, I'm just staring at the screen right now, so it's just me. But the articles are in the description. Is that the EU is run by a bunch of oligarchs, similar to the way that communism is run. It's run by people at the top that have connections. Okay, and that's why I think that if you want to talk about the real problem beyond communism, it's authoritarianism in general. Okay, whether it comes in the mask of communism or the mask of capitalism, because in the end, their bullshit philosophy of communism just gives way to them collecting all the power, right? I mean, we all agree on that. But there's also forms of it in other permutations, you know, such as religious cults, where it doesn't really have to do with communism, so to speak. It has to do with just collecting the power into the hands of an oligarchy, and they'll use a different sort of paradigm to frame it. And that's what the EU is. And I had this information, and it's not going to work right now. But if you look at Manuel Barroso, who was I think he used to be the head of the European Commission, which is one of the dozens of stupid fake governments within the EU. Let me just put my mouse in. Barroso is a former Maoist. But you know what he does now? He works for Goldman Sachs in London. Okay? You don't think, I mean, would you say that that's a contradiction? I think it doesn't exactly seem to me like a consistent position. You grow up, you're in Portugal, it says here, this is July 8th, 2016. This is not in the description, but there are links in the description to him. It says the former Portuguese prime minister and head of the EU Commission will help the Wall Street firm deal with the fallout of the Brexit vote in non-executive advisory roles. So it goes through all of his roles as the head of the Portuguese government and the EU. But it doesn't mention that in the 60s and 70s, he was part of a communist underground in Portugal. Now, at the time, Portugal was literally a fascist dictatorship. But that doesn't mean that, the opposite of fascism is not Maoism, okay? He was part of the Portuguese Workers' Communist Party, the reorganizative movement of the party. See, it's when you need 12 words in order to describe your organization, you might be a cult. How's that for Jeff Foxworthy? And it says the party was founded in 1970 in Portugal. On the ballot, its name appears as the Portuguese Workers' Communist Party, omitting the second part of the name, probably because they don't want to waste paper. Its first Secretary General was Arnaldo Matos. And they were resisting the government at the time, and they were accused of being an agent of the CIA. It says during the revolutionary period of 1974 and 1975, the MRPP, as it's called, was accused mainly by the Portuguese Communist Party of being an agent of the CIA. A belief that was fueled by the cooperation between the MRPP and the Socialist Party against the communist program defended by the Portuguese Communist Party. In 1976, the party changed its name to the Portuguese Workers' Communist Party, and it was then that it started to use the acronym PCTP. Historical leaders are Aldo de Matos and Saldanha Sanchez. The Lucha Popular newspaper. The party's youth wing, now extinct, was the Marxist-Leninist Students' Federation, to which José Manuel Durão Barroso also belonged. The party entered a phase of internal turmoil following the 2015 legislative election, with its party and most known figure, Antonio Garcia Pereira, leaving the party. So then let's go to Barroso's profile. I mean, he became a member of the Social Democratic Party in later years. Now, let me explain something to you. I think I'm on the other stream too for some reason now. So let me close this monitor. This way I don't get... I mean, something's going to happen if I keep doing this. So I'm just looking at your chat comments to see if there's any questions. In any case, so why am I talking about the EU so much? Well, today, the Spanish government announced that it would be stripping the region of Catalonia of its regional autonomy. Okay? And we should be careful for a second, okay? I'm not trying to tell you to support Catalonian independence. I don't know if I support a side in, to be honest with you, what do I care about Spanish or Catalonian aspirations? I mean, I've spoken to the Catalonians; they seem like nice people, but that doesn't mean I'm going to say, "Oh, I hate Spain. I think that Catalonia should become independent." No, I just think that if they want to have a democratic referendum, they should have it, and the Spanish government should work it through with the government in Catalonia, the regional government, to do this in an orderly fashion and avoid massive civil war, which could be what's happening over there soon. Instead, all they're trying to do is attack, threaten. They have arrested people already. Let me open this archived link that I have. As Catalonia says it will defy the orders from the Spanish government. Leaders of the secessionist campaign said the referendum gave them a mandate to claim independence. I wonder why this one doesn't have any images. Whatever. It's not that we will refuse order. It is not personal decision. It is a 7 million person decision. Catalonia's foreign affairs chief Raul Romeva told BBC News. Mr. Romeva was asked whether he believed all institutions, including the police, would follow orders from Catalan institutions rather than obey the Spanish government. And from that perspective, I have no doubt that all civil servants in Catalonia will keep following the instructions provided by the elected and legitimate institutions that we have right now in place in Catalonia. Catalan officials said about 90% of those who took part in the referendum voted for independence, but only 43% of the electorate and 1 in 3 Catalans participated, with most opponents of secession staying at home. The crisis over the wealthy Catalan region has raised fears among European countries of a spillover to other parts of the continent. 2 wealthy regions of northern Italy voted overwhelmingly on Sunday for greater autonomy, although those referendums were held in line with the constitution and were not binding on Rome. Separatists also are active in Belgium's Flanders region, and France's Corsica has long been home to a secessionist movement. So, let me tell you what the significance of this is. Like I've said on a number of videos already, the EU, right now, it depends on the members of its union to believe that it will strengthen their integrity as states. Now, think about it that way. The Catalonians want to become independent. Spain doesn't want to break up. If the EU supports Spain, then the Catalonian people will lose faith in the EU, as they already have. I believe that I've spoken to a couple of them. I can't say broadly that it's happened, but these were people that in the first interview, they were huge supporters of the EU. Now they start to realize that this is an institution that, for all of its claims that it stands up for the human rights around the world, and they'll criticize China, and they'll criticize Israel, and they'll criticize Iraq, and they'll criticize Iran, and they'll criticize Cuba, and they'll criticize Colombia. They're not democratic themselves. It's a huge problem because you do need, I think, you know, if we're people that we believe in the power of direct democracy or representative democracy, we have to have a standard somewhere, and it just seems that there isn't a country like that where there is direct democracy. But let's say that they were to support Catalonia, okay, which they haven't. But hypothetically, if they were to support a country like Catalonia seceding from Spain, then you would see a different issue where these nationalist groups, let's say the Italian nationalists or the French nationalists, if they're fighting against a secessionist movement there, they would say, hold on, fuck you, European Union. You're going to accept people and then have us fall apart and become weaker in order to make yourselves stronger and make the EU a stronger and stronger institution at the expense of its members. We're not going to go along with that. And that's what's happening. Why do you think that the Scottish referendum had to happen at all? Well, I tend to believe, and you can disagree with me, that one of the reasons is that British identity was severely weakened by membership in the EU, because the Scots, for example, we're just more willing to support the EU than many of the British were. Okay? Simon Harris is a British member of the independence movement and live streams from Barcelona. Yeah, I've heard some of his stuff, especially I think he does talk to Nigel Farage on his radio show. So I know exactly what you're talking about. So look, anybody out there, please throw out another topic if you want me to cover today, because I think I'm going to wrap up, although I do have a little more time. So I can spare at the most 10 more minutes. But the bottom line today, we're talking about two different stories. We're talking about the DNC and the EU. Okay, two different institutions that are controlled by moneyed interests, people at the top, oligarchs, that they basically steer the policy of that body in order to control a larger mass of people that in reality they don't have any input to what happens at the top. Do you think the people that volunteer for the Democratic Party at the grassroots level really have any input into the policies at the top? You hear about this James Zogby guy who got bumped from the DNC, and he's saying, "Oh, this sucks because now," and what he really wants to say is, "Oh, the Jews, they've taken control of the DNC again." Well, if that's the case, why is it that the Democratic Party still supports the Iran deal? What they are doing, this is really important, is that the DNC is leveraging right now its support from AIPAC and other organizations that donate them a lot of money, and their support from CARE, which is a contradictory movement, an anti-Israel movement. They want to have it both ways. They want the support of both organizations. And I think both organizations are wrong for supporting the CARE. I can't really, you know why CARE does it, because they want influence. They want to be able to get their people off the hook. And that's what they did the whole time. Okay, do you understand that these organizations, these lobbyist groups, it could be the oil industry, it could be the pharmaceutical industry, it could be lobbyist groups for various foreign governments, and that includes all foreign governments, bar none, even governments that I support. I'm sure that the British, who I support, also have a lobbying organization in Washington, D.C. There's Russian lobbying organizations in D.C., and it's a consequence of the stupidity of our political process that's the way it is. It should be, in my opinion, and you're free to disagree, that international relations are hashed out on an official level more so, and then on the commercial level between different companies and individuals striking business deals. Instead, you have these this massive regulated lobbyist group. That's why I tell friends of mine, I have friends who are very pro-Israel, and I'm pro-Israel, but I tell them, stop asking for these BDS laws. The BDS movement can kill itself off. You don't need laws to do it. All you need is better alternatives. Tell the people why your product is better, why the other side is engaging in harassment and intimidation, and that's how you win. Don't go and try to use the same tactics against them. It's because it's not going to work, because then you lose it's kind of like you fumble the football back to them. They start to say, oh, we're the ones who are being oppressed. We're the ones who are being silenced. And that's not the way it should be. So that's about it. I covered a lot of different issues here. Yes, BDS, J-Man Truth Seeker, a horrible movement, but we can't call for censorship. That's my problem. I despise the BDS movement, but I'm also against censorship. And that's all I can say. I think the BDS movement, to clarify, because I know that probably caught him off guard, the BDS movement throughout the years, for those of you that don't understand, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel is one of the most ridiculous movements, because it's fronted by some of the most pretentious and hostile, there's these celebrities, this director, I think his name is David Leitch or something, or let me see here. The most famous person associated with it is Roger Waters, the former bassist for Pink Floyd. But there's another guy who's also a big supporter of it. I'll find it in a second, and then we're probably gonna call it a day. there's all these organizations that they try to call it, a discriminatory movement, and that it should be prohibited. You can't prohibit a boycott, okay? All you can do is say, fuck the boycott. I'm gonna buy whatever I want. That's the way that you do it. And so far, just so you know, the BDS movement has been such a colossal failure that there's plenty of people, for example, and these are guys that some of them I don't like. I don't like Ed Asner, for example, and J.K. Rowling, and other people that oppose the boycott. Lady Gaga, for example. I think Lady Gaga sucks. But there's been so many people that have come out in opposition to it. My favorite one is Tom York of Radiohead, also Johnny Rotten, John Lydon from the Sex Pistols, and Public Image Limited, who have said, we oppose that, they say we oppose certain policies of the Israeli government. However, we also think that we should appear in countries where there's controversies going on in order to promote policies that we support. And, we believe in our music is a way for people to sort of interact with us and give us and feedback to us, and then we can interact with them and spread our ideas. And I think that's the positive way to affect change, even if it's these are guys who are on the left, Tom York, but it's not an authoritarian left. Okay, there is, and you guys might not believe me. Okay, you guys might not believe me, but there are people who are on a non-authoritarian left that they say, okay, we want to just believe in a more cooperative society. We're going to try to build that society, as opposed to people who say, we believe in a more cooperative society, and we're going to force people to cooperate. We're going to force you to do things that are cooperative. And that's the way I think that they're doing it, by breaking the boycott, by going there, by performing concerts, by saying, I can accept that people don't think the way that I do. I'd like to go there and present my views and present my music to an audience, and they have a good audience over in Israel. That that's the definition of a tolerant and open society, a society where you can have people disagree. And I think in the United States we're losing that. I think in many countries we're losing that to this political polarization. So anyway, I'm getting long-winded, but thanks to everybody for tuning in. J-Man Truth Seeker, as always. And then, former president of Chile, Augusto Pinochet, I guess, keep a lookout, because I know that the CIA, they don't always treat their former clients well. So I guess watch your back or something. And have a great night, guys. Maybe there will be a broadcast tomorrow. I'm not sure yet, because, I have to do some prep, and I'm also working on some other projects. And there's a project that I really want to work on that I haven't started. But in the meantime, have a good night and stay bold. And check out my minds.com at Chef Leopard, and also my Twitter if you want. I'm not crazy about Twitter, but I know some of you are. Good night, guys.